As 2021 comes to a close, I would like to take a look back and reflect upon all of the great releases that came out this year. 2021 has had an abundance of exceptional works in all artistic mediums, ranging from movies, to TV shows, to video games, to music, and so much more. If you're familiar with my channel, then you know that I love all forms of art and the things they can teach us. So I'm making this video about what I personally think are the top 10 things that came out this year. As a disclaimer, I'm just one person, so it was impossible to watch and play and read and listen to everything possible this year. So if your favorite something gets left off of this list, this isn't me taking a dig at it and saying that it's garbage, but that out of all of the things I personally saw this year, this is the top 10 I came up with. If you have any recommendations from this year, I do highly encourage you to comment. I'd love to experience some great things I missed out on in 2021 or just haven't gotten around to yet. Before I elaborate on my top 10, however, I want to make a quick note. There may be some fairly minor spoilers for each item on this list, so if you wanted to experience said item with absolutely zero spoilers, then just click on the next timestamp in the description to skip over it. So, without further ado, let's look at the top 10 things that came out in 2021. Titan, or how ignorant Americans like me would probably call it, Titan, is a French body horror film written and directed by Julia Ducournau, and it might just be one of the best films that have come out in the year 2021. And critics seem to agree with me on this too. At the time that I'm writing this, it's currently sitting at an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. But even better than that, this film was the winner of the prestigious Palme d'Or Award at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival. If you're not aware of just how big of a deal this award is, just look at some of these past winners. Parasite should immediately come to mind. Titan stands out though as being extra special. It's the first horror film to win the Palme d'Or, and it's also the second time a female director ever won it, and it's sincerely well deserved. If you're not familiar with the film's premise, it's about a troubled showgirl named Alexia who's revealed to be a serial killer pretty early on in the film. It's hard to say much more without giving spoilers, so I'll try my best to be vague. At the beginning of the movie, when Alexia is a child, she suffers a head injury from a severe car crash, though she manages to seemingly live without much permanent damage except for a titanium plate fitted into her skull. This moment, however, seems to have changed something about Alexia's psyche forever. And it's not just a serial killing thing either. All I can say is that she gains a newfound affinity for motor vehicles. And to say anything more would spoil a lot of the horror and surprise this film has to give you. And boy does it have surprises. In fact, the premise evolves into something completely unpredictable. And because of that, the film really keeps you guessing on where it's going. And it might sound weird to bring this up, but my nipples have never hurt more than they've ever hurt before until I watched this movie. Maybe I'm just squeamish, but Titan has an insane ability to make you viscerally recoil. We're quite desensitized as a society to the point that I doubt many of us would hide behind our fingers during a typical slasher film. So the fact that this movie can make you squirm and cringe and feel actual pain is really powerful. The film's greatest strength, however, lies not in its horror or in its unpredictability. Instead, this film is incredible because of its multi-layered themes. There are several ways to interpret this film, all of them brilliant, deep, and thought-provoking. It raises questions about gender identity and the transgender experience. It examines the feminine and masculine dichotomy in our social understandings of gender. And in many ways, it also portrays elements of the potential sexualization of trauma. It's a heartbreaking film characterized by trauma and grief. At its core, it depicts what it's like to experience those things and how we as people deal with them. And that idea is what pushes Titan to number 10 on my list. About a year ago, I tried watching a new TV show called The Wilds, which is a show about 9 teenage girls who end up stranded on an island after their plane crashes on its way to a young women's empowerment retreat. The reason I mention this is because Yellowjackets has a rather similar premise to The Wilds, except for the fact that it's wildly better. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to talk down on The Wilds because a lot of talent and hard work went into the show. But there's a scene in it that turned me off from the show so badly that I quit it like 2 episodes in. Spoilers, but one of the girls dies pretty early on in that show, and the other girls, who have no idea who she is except for the fact that she was a Pink fan, bury her and start singing a fucking Pink song as they lay her to rest. It's so tonally weird and out of left field, and although I know that the plot gets much more intriguing after that episode, I didn't have it in me to keep watching after seeing something so cringe-inducing. Maybe someone can change my mind about that. Anyway, because of that scene, I had a little bit of girls on an island PTSD, so I was afraid that Yellowjackets was going to disappoint me just like The Wilds did. Fortunately, Yellowjackets doesn't have any girls singing Pink in it, but I may eat my own words since the show isn't even close to finishing yet, so it's a bit risky of me to put this on the list in case the remaining episodes are complete ass. But so far, the episodes are definitely not complete ass. They're so damn good that I'm willing to put this show on my top 10 list even though I don't quite know how the narrative pans out yet. Like I said earlier, Yellowjackets has a similar premise to The Wilds, but instead, it's about a team of talented high school girls soccer players who survive a plane crash deep in the Ontario wilderness. Lord of the Flies comparisons are certainly apt as the girls try to figure out how to survive in established order. There are 2 timelines the show presents. 1996, where the team is trying to survive in the wilderness while they wait for help, and 2021, the present day, where we follow the lives of some of the girls and maybe some of the guys who managed to get rescued. It's unclear who survived or what entirely happened on the island, but what we do know is that some culty cannibalistic shit happened, and that there's a deep conspiratorial mystery going on in the present where someone may be trying to murder the survivors. That's part of the fun of the show. Even though you already know something terrible happens while the team is stranded, watching it unfold and trying to figure out what's going on in the past and the present day is still an absorbing and gripping mystery. I wouldn't call Yellowjackets prestige TV, but that's not a knock on the show. That just means it isn't pretentious enough to add vaguely philosophical and undecipherable language for the sole purpose of acting smart. And I say that as a lover of prestige TV. Yellowjackets' strengths instead lie in its fun and interesting characters. And there are a lot of them. This show probably has one of the best ensemble casts out of all airing TV shows right now, and you would be missing out if you didn't give this show a chance. Christina Ricci is especially a standout. It's amazing when the show is able to get you to care about the stories of so many different characters at once. It reminds me of Lost in that way, which also had an emphasis on being a character drama in the midst of mysterious island stuff happening. Yellowjackets is ultimately a character study done right. You'll love each and every one of these pieces of shit, and for that reason, it's worthy of being number 9 on my list. As someone who despises the toxicity that League of Legends once briefly held in my life, Arcane came as a pleasant surprise to me this year. If you aren't already aware, Arcane is an animated show featuring characters and settings from the League of Legends universe. But don't let that label steer you away from this show. You don't have to know anything about League of Legends to enjoy this show. It stands on its own as a high-quality piece of art. Let me tell you why. Arcane has a deep cast of well-crafted characters with believable motivations. In fact, they're also distinct and compelling that I can't talk about all of them unless I wanted to make a whole video about the show. I'd love to do that, but I'm going to talk a bit more broadly about Arcane in this particular video so I can cover just why I love it so much. Arcane portrays the origin stories of several characters from 2 particular locations: the technologically advanced utopian city of Piltover, and the squalid, repressed undercity of Zaun. In the show, we get to see the complicated and oppressive relationship that develops between both cities due to the clear infrastructural and social imbalances that exist in their fairly segregated societies. In other words, Piltover is rich as shit and Zaun is poor as hell. It's the privileged versus the underprivileged, and the exploiters versus the exploited. It's far more complicated than that though. Dark forces and corruption exist in both cities, and so much goes on in the shadows. There's depth to the conflicts that this show presents, and it's not as simple as saying that this show is about how poor people get repeatedly stomped by the atrocities of life. Piltover has its share of intricate social issues too. Social differences do permeate every theme of this show though, and Arcane depicts the complexity of this rather unfair social situation between Piltover and Zaun primarily through the perspectives of 2 sisters named Vi and Powder, whose tragic backgrounds and further development form a powerful emotional core to this show. You'll feel for Vi and Powder just as you'll feel for every other character in this show, and that's where Arcane's greatest strength lies. It's nuanced characters that elevate every other aspect of the show. Each character is excellently acted and beautifully animated, and their actions drive a bold, well-written narrative that cannot be forgotten. And even though those elements alone are enough to make a show amazing, Arcane takes things a step further by having incredible world building. And it takes things another step further by having thought-provoking social commentary on the consequences of social stratification, on the risks of technological innovation, on the issues of generational trauma, and so on and so forth. Arcane is a show you shouldn't skip over, and because of its depth, it's easily my number 8 best thing from 2021. This choice may come as a surprise to some people considering how little this film was talked about, but The Night House was one of my favorite movies from this whole year. And for how stacked this year was with great films, it's a testament to this movie that it managed to make it on my top 10 list of 2021. The Night House follows Beth, a fresh widow whose husband committed suicide for unknown reasons. She now remains alone in their beautiful lakeside home he built for her. And though she tries her best to overcome her grief, nightmares of a ghostly presence in the house haunt her almost every night. And it's not just bad dreams or things that seem to exist only in her head either. Beth knows something is wrong, despite what her friends say. Owen, her late husband, kept enough secrets from her to make the suicide completely unanticipated. And Beth wants to know what those secrets are. As she digs through his belongings, she discovers things that are both equally strange and disturbing. So much so that it becomes a harrowing mystery that she's desperate to solve. And it's one of the creepiest, most uncomfortable mysteries I've seen this year. It's no secret that critically acclaimed horror films in the last decade have trended towards portraying themes of grief, trauma, depression, and other mental health ailments. This movie is one of them, and not surprisingly, those themes work excellently with the dark, oppressive vibe of horror movies. And this film nails those thematic elements with its powerful, abstract narrative. The Night House manages to capture the emotions of grief and losing a loved one so perfectly, most especially losing someone to suicide. Its plot is original and its script is great, but what makes this movie even better than its powerful and emotional themes is that it manages to depict those themes with pure excellence and mastery in all aspects of filmmaking. The sound design for this movie is top notch. Like, seriously. It keeps you tense throughout the entire film, and because of this, the movie doesn't have to rely on jump scares to make you afraid. To be fair, there is one particular jump scare in this movie that absolutely wrecked the living shit out of everyone in my theater, but it's so damn good that you can't even be mad about it. This movie is genuine art. The props, the set pieces, and the background are used so well in every scene that you just can't help but admire it. David Bruckner, the director of The Night House, utilizes negative space so well that I'm still thinking about certain shots in the movie as if they're renowned photographs in an art museum. Not to mention Rebecca Hall's fantastic performance. She's the absolute centerpiece to this film, and without her, I don't think this movie would have been as emotionally powerful as it was. I'm a bit biased because I think she's an absurdly talented actress, but if you watch this film for yourself, I think you'd agree with me when I say that she plays the part of a grieving wife so damn well. Take some time out of your day to watch The Night House if you haven't done so already. It's criminally underrated, and has undeniably earned its number 7 spot on my top 10 list of things from this year. If you've seen my video about why I think you should listen to Maria Isabel, then you know exactly why I think her 2021 EP, I Hope You're Very Unhappy Without Me, is one of the best things released in 2021. To put it simply, the album is catchy and pleasant to listen to, but more importantly, it's honest. There's a certain vulnerability to this album that allows you to connect to Maria's inner feelings, and when art is able to make you feel the way that the artist does, then that means it's something special. On this YouTube channel, I go on and on about the idea of feelings and why they're important to art. And for good reason too. If art can make you feel something, then it did its job correctly. Feelings are why we consume art in the first place, whether it makes us sad, happy, angry, motivated, or any other emotion on the spectrum. We connect best to art when it makes us feel something. And Maria Isabel's EP, I Hope You're Very Unhappy Without Me, is definitely powerful enough to make you feel something. Whether it's her song's perfect melodies or her relatable lyrics about distance, heartbreak, love, and romance, listening to her music will make you feel a multitude of emotions you might not have even known you had. In my other video, I talked about how despite being in a perfectly healthy relationship, Maria's music makes me feel as if I've lost someone really important to me. This is what I mean when I say that Maria's vulnerability in this album is special. I'm feeling shit that has nothing to do with me or my own life. Maria's lyrics are authentic to an almost absurd degree, and as you listen to each song in this album, you experience this intense buildup of hurt that culminates in you being able to understand what it was like for Maria to go through a recent heartbreak. You can feel exactly what she felt, and that's why this album made it to number 6 on my list. Take a listen for yourself if you haven't already. I promise you it won't disappoint. The Forgotten City is easily 2021's best time loop mystery. Without a doubt, there's no competition. I say this not in disrespect for the other great time loop games that came out this year, but rather to emphasize just how incredible this game is in sucking you into an engaging, fleshed out mystery that'll have you gasping at each new clue, finding, and deduction. Whenever I play single player video games, I'm usually pretty stone-faced. But this game was one of those rare instances where I'd involuntarily widen my eyes in shock whenever I figured something out. At every turn, there's an intriguing discovery to be made. It's a riveting mystery with a captivating premise that'll draw you in the moment you first figure out what it is. The Forgotten City follows your character who travels 2,000 years into the past to relive the final days of a cursed Roman city, where if one person sins and breaks the golden rule, everyone in the town dies. And when you get there, it appears that someone does indeed sin. And you need to figure out who did and why all of this is happening. The fate of the city is in your character's hands. Luckily, with the help of the town's mayor, you're able to exploit a time loop that allows you to go back in time to the moment you first arrived. But time is ticking before someone breaks the golden rule again, and you've got to try your best to stop them before it happens. And trust me when I say that there's so much more to this premise than just a bunch of Roman citizens trying not to sin. Every single aspect of the game is layered in a shroud of deep mystery and intrigue. When you think you know what's going on, or when you think you figure the mystery out, the game surprises you each and every time. Best of all, you can solve this mystery however you want. It's a non-linear story with multiple endings, and you can resolve issues through reason, bribery, intimidation, violence, and more. So long as you're careful not to break the golden rule. Unless you want that to happen. The Forgotten City has an incredible narrative bolstered by a wide cast of interesting characters. They're charming, charismatic, cunning, and most importantly, well-detailed and highly interactive. You'll find so many ways to get them to do what you want, or to get them to interact with each other. You can learn their routines and throw them off if you find it necessary. You can turn them against each other if you think that's right. You can even cause as much chaos as possible and see where it takes you. What's important here is player choice. And that's what makes this game so damn good to me, because it really makes you feel like you're solving the mystery yourself, and not just going through the motions of completing quests, even though that's really what you're doing. And that's not the only reason why this game is amazing. One of its best aspects is its attention to detail. Not just in its characters or its mystery, but in its setting. There's historically authentic art, architecture, costumes, and customs. And if you're like me, you'll find all of this super fascinating to the point that you'll want to do research about Romans and Greeks and Egyptians and more as you play. You would think that history would be a little bit boring, but it sure as hell isn't in the context of this mystery. Believe me. The Forgotten City is a gorgeous game with so many things going right for it. If you love time loops or mysteries, please pick this game up and give it a shot. It's an absolutely wild ride, and for that, it's easily deserving of number 5 on my list. I consider Dune to be one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, and this isn't a controversial opinion. It's consistently placed on lists of the most influential novels ever written. It's been translated into dozens of languages, It's sold over 20 million copies, it's won a multitude of writing awards, and it's one of the top reviewed books of all time. Because of this success, expectations for this film were justifiably high. And when you pair this movie with renowned film director Denis Villeneuve and a stacked cast of talented actors, all you can hope is that this movie did such an excellent book justice. Based on history though, adaptations of Dune have not fared well due to its dense and complex source material. It's often described as unfilmable. But was this 2021 adaptation able to overcome such a negative label? In my opinion, yes, it did manage to overcome that label. That's obviously why it's number 4 on my list. It's not necessarily the most pinpoint accurate adaptation of a novel ever, but it's pretty damn close to it. Dune captures the feel and the scope of the novel perfectly with its careful plotting and world building. It may be rather slow-paced, yes, but it's a necessary pace to portray just what made the Dune novel so good. The film remains an engaging drama weaved by the layered interactions of politics, religion, ecology, and technology. With all these things combined in the context of humanity, you're left with a captivating narrative that will keep you thinking about its implications long after you're finished with it. And not only is this film intellectually stimulating, but it's a near masterpiece in so many regards. The costuming is great, the film sets are beautiful, the acting is impeccable, and the soundtrack and sound design is absolutely top-notch. Dune really feels like its own universe separate from ours, and it's thanks to the combination of all these different factors. Watching this film in a large theater is important to experiencing Dune at its best. Unless you've got an incredible sound system and a massive screen at home, you'll never feel the sheer scale that this movie makes you feel. Everything is just so massive and impactful and heavy, and feeling that scale just engrosses you into the movie more. It's rare for a film to make you feel like you've just entered an entirely different world, and Dune is able to do that with ease. That's why Dune is number 4 on my list. If you're able to, watch this film in the best conditions possible. Experiencing the desert world of Arrakis is something everyone should do at least once in their lifetime. Season 1 of Invincible was a social media cultural phenomenon, and it had every right to be one. It has a killer soundtrack. It's fairly well paced with an engaging plot. It has a great ensemble cast of memorable characters. It has a star-studded voice acting cast. And, to top it all off, it's an adaptation that makes some improvements upon the original source material without being unfaithful. I'm a huge fan of Robert Kirkman, and like many people, I discovered his works after watching The Walking Dead and reading the comic book series. If you've read the comics for The Walking Dead, then you know how bad the show butchered that story. But I'm not here to talk about or bash The Walking Dead. I only bring it up because I find it important to emphasize that adaptations of Robert Kirkman's works should try to stay as close to the source material as possible, because those original works are incredible as is, and to take risks changing those stories could potentially hinder them. I'm not saying that Kirkman's works are flawless. In fact, they're far from it. But making major changes to the original source material can ruin what makes the original story so good. So I'm glad that the Invincible TV show is not doing that. Instead, it makes minor changes to small flaws in the comics, and it's all the better for it. Season 1 of Invincible is easily one of the best superhero shows to have come out in the last year, and perhaps even in the past decade. Or maybe even ever. Despite its stiff competition, Invincible stands out amongst the rest for the dramatic narrative risks it takes and its tense, action-packed scenes. It's a heartfelt superhero story embedded within a flurry of violence and destruction. And at almost every turn, your heart will be pounding for these characters as you hope for them to succeed in a world that definitely isn't kind to them. And if you don't know what this show is about, then what I need to tell you is to go into it blind. Trust me, your experience of this show will blow your mind. If you have to have a little context, then all I can tell you is this. Invincible follows 17-year-old Mark Grayson, a high school student who is just starting to develop his superpowers. His father, Omni-Man, is hands down the most powerful superhero on the planet. And although Mark has always known his father to be noble and just, Mark soon discovers that his father's history may not be what it seems. The only bad thing I can say about this show is that its animation isn't the strongest, but that doesn't actually hinder it at all. In fact, this element only elevates the show, as it seems to mimic the aesthetic of Saturday morning cartoons of old. I do hope that the animation gets a little bit more fluid and clean in future seasons, but other than that, this show has everything you want in a powerful narrative. It's exciting, it's smart, it's charming, and it's number 3 on my top 10 list for a reason. Watch it if you haven't already. You won't regret it. If you want to know what video games' art looks like, look no further than Daniel Mullen's Inscryption. It's hard to describe what this game is without spoiling what happens, and I want to be as vague as possible because it's one of those experiences you just have to go into blind if you want to enjoy it to its fullest extent. It's part roguelite, it's part deck builder, it's part escape room, it's part a lot of things. Most notably, it's a game where its mysterious, psychological horror elements are so integral to making this game a masterpiece. At its core, Inscryption is a mystery puzzle game where you try to figure out what exactly is happening in this creepy cabin in the woods. For just a little bit more context, the game begins with a man starting up this game called Inscryption. But for some reason, you can't press new game. You can only continue from the saved game file. You're greeted by a card dealer masked in shadows who forces you to play a rather violent card game. And from there, things only get weirder. Your cards begin to talk to you. You find hidden puzzles scattered around the room. You discover secrets about the mysterious dealer. Most importantly though, you cannot seem to figure a way out of here, even in death. Winning the card game may be your only option. And honestly, no description of this game can ever do it justice. There are too many twists and cryptic elements that I refuse to outline here, because some things are just meant to be experienced yourself. Inscryption is so genius that you wish you thought of it yourself. It's clever, it's engaging, it's innovative, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it on the top of many people's Game of the Year lists. It sure as hell is on mine. As you uncover Inscryption's hidden narrative, you'll find yourself in awe of its ingenious design. It'll make you crave more and more until you realize you've just finished it in one 10-hour-long sitting. And trust me when I say this, it'll be hard for you to look at other video games the same again. It isn't flawless, but nothing is. Inscryption is 100% an experience worth playing, and for that reason, it's my number 2 best thing from 2021. Do yourself a favor and check it out. Before we get to my number one best thing from 2021, I'd like to talk about a few honorable mentions that didn't quite manage to make it on my list this year. First off, Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. Disco Elysium originally released in 2019, and it was already an incredible game. But I wanted to recognize the final cut because it adds an extensive amount of new voice acting, performance enhancements, bug fixes, and new side quests. The game has a powerful, provocative narrative, and it deserves to be played by everyone. And if the final cut wasn't just an update to this game, Disco Elysium would have definitely made it onto my top 10 list this year. Next honorable mention, Squid Game. I wouldn't call this show the best show ever made, but it's fun, it has some always pertinent social commentary, and it's so culturally trendy to the point that you can't ignore its presence and influence on the media world. Third honorable mention, The Binding of Isaac: Repentance. The Binding of Isaac is an enduring and influential game series in the indie roguelike game scene, and Repentance is a strong addition to its legacy. This DLC is so damn chock full of great content that it can keep you entertained for months, and that value alone is worth so much to a poor gamer like me. Fourth honorable mention, Spider-Man: No Way Home. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and No Way Home is an excellent addition to Marvel's expansive repertoire of films. It's a bit fanservice-y, but it pulls it off really damn well. It might be one of the most emotional Marvel films yet. Lastly, I'd like to give an honorable mention to Season 2 of How To with John Wilson. I have no idea how to talk about this show because it's so fucking weird, but I love it. John Wilson is such a character, and it's probably one of the best docuseries I've ever watched in my life. Watch it if you love culture. It's full of it. And here are a few other things I liked this year that I just don't have the time to talk about but want to recognize anyway. They're worth a look at too. Succession is the best dark comedy satire airing on TV right now, and if you're not watching it, you're severely robbing yourself of a good time. Succession follows the chaotic lives of the ludicrously wealthy Roy family, controllers of the international media conglomerate Waystar Royco. Waystar is run by the aging patriarch Logan Roy, whose declining health requires him to start looking for a successor, even if he has no plans on stepping down anytime soon. Picking one of his children seems like the obvious choice, but although Logan's eldest son Kendall appears to be the heir apparent, things aren't quite that simple in this mess of a family. Succession is one of those shows where the premise simply cannot encapsulate just how good the show is. Its narrative, its comedy, and its drama is driven by its engrossingly awful characters, all of whom you need to watch, and all of whom you learn to love and hate at the same time. Season 3 of Succession brings us the best of all those aforementioned elements. The narrative is sharp and engaging, the comedy remains as topical, relevant, and witty as ever, and the drama is some of the greatest chaos you'll ever witness on TV. It's an incredibly smart show with biting and caustic satire that'll make you think long and hard about how the upper class damages our society with their power and influence. It examines how out of touch rich people are, it criticizes the way the media runs our world, and it even delves into the way generational abuse creates drastic, branching, and lasting damage on families. Succession is an absolute tour de force. It's one of the funniest shows ever made, and even if you aren't a fan of satires, This show is fucking hilarious otherwise.
I'd castrate you and marry you in a heartbeat.
I know some fans don't think that season 3 is as good as the previous 2 seasons, but I beg to differ. Season 3 moves the plot along in a realistically depressing way, and it gives us further insight and developments in the characters we've grown accustomed to. Not only that, but I think this season has shown us the best performances of every actor so far. Each cast member nails their comedic and dramatic moments with complete and utter precision, and you'll go from laughing out loud at one scene to feeling a deep pit in your stomach in the next. If there's anything you need to watch or play or listen to out of everything on my top 10 list this year, it's season 3 of Succession. It's my favorite thing released in the year 2021, and it's mind-blowingly superb. Get yourself that HBO Max subscription and watch it now. Before I close out this video, I just want to say thank you for making it all the way to the end here. If you enjoyed what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content similar to this. I make videos about all things writing related. Hopefully you've discovered some new things from my top 10 list that you want to check out. I tend to highlight a lot of lesser known works on this channel, and this list has a few things I don't see a lot of people talk about. And, like I said at the beginning of this video, comment down below if you have some suggestions for me or for other viewers. I'd love to watch or read or play new things. And if you have any agreements or disagreements with my list, let me know too. Let's have a productive discussion about art. While you're here, I'd also like to thank my patron Edith Lopez Torres for helping make this video happen. If you'd like to support me further, please check out my Patreon. I'll leave a link down in the description below. And if you've got some time, check out some of my other videos too. I really appreciate you watching this one. And to everyone who made it to the end here, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.